Good morning or afternoon. This is Mrs. Woywood, and we're going to read chapter 6 now of I Survived the Eruption of Mount St. Helens. This is written by Lauren Tarshis, and Scott Dawson was her illustrator. Soon will be the anniversary of the eruption of Mount St. Helens. It erupted in 1980 on May 18th. Our friends have found the cabin. They've gone inside, and just as Jess was ready to take a picture, the cabin shook. Sam thinks for sure it's the curse of the skeleton woman. She dropped the camera, it slid away from her, and now we need to find out what happened. They stumbled out of the cabin, but the shaking was outside too, and the ground bucked up and down, and the trees swayed back and forth violently. So Jess and the boys clung to each other for balance as they staggered to the trail. But then, crash! A huge tree fell right in front of them, and they turned to escape in the other direction, but crash! A massive limb hit the ground just feet from where they stood. They had to get out of there. "Wait! My dad's camera!" Jess shouted. There was no going back. The ground was now splitting apart like ice breaking on a frozen pond. Clods of dirt flew up. Yawning holes opened in the earth, some deeper than any grave. And Jess and the twins huddled close together, their heads ducked down low, their arms wrapped tight around each other, and more tree limbs crashed to the ground. Jess braced herself for the crushing blow of a huge branch hitting her head, and then in a blink, the shaking stopped, and the forest went mute. The only sounds were their own sobbing breaths. They stood there too shocked and too scared to speak. And then, without a word, they joined hands and ran down the trail. They jumped over fallen branches and holes in the ground, over roots and rocks, and Jess kept looking over her shoulders, sure that skeleton woman was after them. She could practically feel the witch's oven breath huffing at her back. Missy had been right all along. The forest was cursed. They were almost to the parking lot when they heard Mr. Rowan shouting for them. He came rushing up the trail, moving his burly body way faster than Jess ever thought he could. He grabbed all three of them in a bear hug. They hadn't yet caught their breath when a man came hurrying up to them. He had dark brown skin and curly hair and looked to be about Mom's age. "Hey, are you all okay?" Jess and the twins peeled themselves away from Mr. Rowan. "We're all in one piece," Mr. Rowan called out. "You?" "I'm fine," the man said, dusting off his pants, "and that was a pretty strong quake." "Sure was," Mr. Rowan answered. Jess and the twins stared at each other in shock and relief. An earthquake. Of course. Earthquakes happen sometimes in Washington State. They even had earthquake drills at school. They'd been so brainwashed by Missy's dumb story that they weren't thinking clearly. So Mr. Rowan introduced himself to the man. "Skip Rowan," he said. "Tim Morales," the man said, shaking Mr. Rowan's hand and smiling warmly at the twins and Jess. "Do you have a cabin here, Tim?" Mr. Rowan asked. "Actually, I'm here for work," he said, reaching into his shirt pocket and taking out a business card, which he handed to Mr. Rowan. "Dr. Timothy Morales," Mr. Rowan read, "Department of Seismology, University of Washington. You study earthquakes? Well, you came to the right place today." Dr. Morales nodded. "Actually, we've detected at least 50 mild earthquakes in this area, all in this past week, and they're coming directly under St. Helens. At first, we weren't sure what these earthquakes meant, but now we're certain they're warning signs. Warning of what? Mr. Rowan asked. Dr. Morales was quiet for a moment, and then he looked up at Mount St. Helens. And what he said next was more unbelievable than any horror story Jess had ever heard. I think Mount St. Helens is about to erupt. We have to find out in Chapter 7. How believable is Dr. Morales? But after having had that read to you, I'm going to show you the work that I want you to follow up with. And I'm going to reverse the camera so that you'll be able to see. How do I do that? No, I'm not going to reverse the camera. I'm going to show you. This asks you to summarize. Please summarize what you just heard in Chapter 6. And then do a reflection, a written reflection on what did Tim say the mild earthquake or warning signs of. And a vocabulary context. Do you remember the line? And if you don't, you can find it if you rewind it. Yawning holes opened in the earth, some deeper than any grave. What do you think yawning meant? And what is the opposite or the antonym of yawning? Narrow? Deep? Wide? See if you can connect. I think Mount St. Helens is about to erupt. How would you react if the scientists told you the volcano you were standing on at that moment was about to erupt? Interested to see what you think. And next, we'll do Chapter 7, but not right now. You have work to do.